Get ready to take a flamethrower to the official narrative and learn what the elites don't want you to know. You're listening to The Tom Woods Show.
Hey everybody, Tom Woods here. Welcome to The Tom Woods Show. It's episode 2533 with our old friend and repeat guest, Mikkel Thorup, who is the world's most sought-after expat consultant. And we're going to be talking about a whole bunch of things related to that kind of subject. You don't have to be a full-blown expat to learn from Mikkel or even a would-be expat. There's plenty of things in between he can talk to you about. But more and more, I think people are considering possibilities they hadn't considered in the past. And of course, we want to talk about his upcoming Expat Money Summit, which I'm involved with as well. So Mikkel, welcome back.
Thanks very much for having me, Tom. It's been a little while since I've been on the program, but not that long since you and I talked. We were chatting recently. So very excited to be back and hopefully share some good insights with your audience today.
Well, here's the thing I was kind of hinting at before we hit the record button. The very first time you appeared on the Tom Woods Show, I was very interested in what you had to say. I'm always interested in this kind of subject, but I just thought of it as something that it might be a service to my audience. They might have some interest in this, but it would never really apply to me. I'm too much of a homebody. I'm never going anywhere. Doesn't matter how bad it gets. Old Woods here will stand his ground and fight. And just since between that time and now, I would say I am much more in the position of somebody who thinks, well, maybe I could use Mikkel's services one of these days.
That's amazing.
That's just how quickly things have changed in this country.
Now, that's amazing. It's very interesting to hear you say that because actually I think a lot of people are probably feeling very similar to you. A lot of people never imagined themselves actually living in another country or having to plant these types of flags or do these things. But now I think it's becoming quite apparent, the value in it, and that it's not just a maybe or a nice to have, but actually it's quite imperative, especially in the direction that Canada, the US, Western Europe, these countries are going. You have to protect your downside risk.
Well, let me ask you the kind of question, though, that a newbie to all this, like me, might initially have, which is, for all your complaints about the United States, and we might concede that it has its problems, other countries have the same problems or worse, whether it's the rule of law or it's taxation or whatever, they are even worse than the U.S. Now, is that the way we should be thinking, or is that even true? Or, do people come to you with that concern that, yeah, I'm pretty fed up with what's going on in the U.S., but I'm afraid that anywhere I go will be at least as bad?
Okay, well, let's break it down piece by piece. Okay, let's take taxation, for example, all right? Not only is the IRS arguably the most aggressive organization on planet Earth, U.S. no longer has low taxes. Not at all. You can compare it to around 42 countries that have what we would consider tax havens or offshore jurisdictions or low tax jurisdictions. So there's lots of places. Okay, I understand United States taxes on worldwide income, and we still need to deal with all of those types of things. But the taxes in the country can be zero or maybe single digits, not double digits, not mid-double digits. And then when you start adding in not just income tax, but income tax and payroll tax and corporate tax and capital gains tax and dividend distribution and wealth taxes and property taxes and taxes on gasoline and sales tax and value-added tax, it really gets absolutely out of control. Like take Panama, for example, where I live. It's considered a territorial tax system, which really just means that if the money is made outside of Panama, there's no tax inside of Panama. We don't have, and so that's no income tax, no corporate tax. Then there's no tax on your withholding tax. There's no tax on capital gains. Yes, we have a value-added tax, a sales tax, but it's only 7%. It's a single-digit amount. Where I'm from in Canada, I think it's 13% or 15%. So, you can go from paying 50, 60% on your money in tax down to almost nothing. So US is not really competitive in that way anymore. Then take other things like safety, for example. I just got back from El Salvador a couple of days ago. That used to be the most unsafe country in the world, and it is now the second safest country in all of the Americas, certainly a lot safer than the United States. So they've been able to change it and turn it around in just a couple of years by changing the laws and cracking down on crime. Now, a lot of people with an open border, which, I don't necessarily need to get into today, but a lot of the not so great people are moving up to the United States. Crime rates are going up in the US, not down. So there's problems with that. There's just like over and over and over again, I can give you examples of how countries, down here in Latin America or in other places in the world, which are a lot more competitive than the US is these days.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned Panama, because I just last week talked to a friend of mine who lives in Panama, who said that when I asked him, wasn't it a huge adjustment for you to move to a whole new country? And of course, to some extent, it's always going to be. But
Sure.
he said the thing that surprised him was that there was a community there of other people who, from Canada, from the US, who had settled there. So he had a lot in common with those people, and they were prepared to welcome him. So it's not as, let's say, as radical a shift as you might think it is. And of course, you realize that everything's a trade-off. I mean, you can have familiarity and high taxes and wokery everywhere. I mean, if that's what you want. And it's a question of what are you willing to give up in return for what you get.
100%. Now, most of Latin America is very family first. So if you want a more, Christian values, more conservative type of lifestyle, Latin America is much better for these things. There is no wokery down here at all. We don't have these conversations about transgenders or about, boys going into the girls' bathroom or tampons in the boys' bathroom. Like, this stuff just doesn't exist here at all. So a lot of people, they're very happy to get away from this. Now, to your earlier point about having a built-in community, absolutely. Like, a place like Panama is what I would call an expat hotspot. You can figure roughly 50% of all people living in Panama City are expats. That doesn't necessarily mean they're Americans and Canadians. Doesn't even necessarily mean they're Europeans or Australians or Asians. They can be expats from Venezuela. They can be from Peru or from Argentina or places like this. So it's really a world city where people are coming to. So it gives you a good solid footing. People want to make friends. They're interested where you come from and want to understand your background and what you do and why you're there. Like, I have loads of friends from all over the world. I've got friends from Norway and from New Zealand and places all over Europe. But I also have lots of Panamanian friends, because I think getting in touch with the local community is amazing, and learning the local language and the history and the food and all of these things. That's the flavor. That's part of the enjoyment side. That's not a downside. That's a positive,
Now, if I were to, let's say, take advantage of the tax situation that you're describing, would I first have to renounce my U.S. citizenship?
No. So there are a few tools in the toolbox for Americans, okay? First of all, we have to be clear, as I mentioned before, Americans have a legal responsibility to file taxes and pay taxes on their worldwide income. However, there are a couple of programs in place by the IRS to legally reduce those, okay? The first one is called the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, all right? Now, you can apply for this while remaining a U.S. citizen. So you can have these tax breaks. You keep your U.S. citizenship, keep your U.S. passport, but you could live in a place like Panama or Costa Rica or anywhere else in the world, all right? And what it does is it allows you to exclude the first $126,500 of earned income. So basically, you don't pay taxes on that first $126,500, all right? Now, the neat thing is that if your spouse is also a U.S. tax person, then it's a doubling effect. So now you're talking just over $250,000 in income where you're not responsible for paying taxes. You still have to file, but you don't have to pay taxes on that. Then beyond that, there's housing credits, there's foreign tax credits, there's other things that you can do. But let's say, for example, you're making more than $250,000 and you want to get rid of your tax bill in the IRS completely. Then we would be looking at renouncing your U.S. citizenship, but we would have to have another citizenship for you before that happened. So if you had ancestors from Italy or Poland or Ireland or Lithuania or Latvia or somewhere like this, then we would try to get you one of those citizenships. If we don't have something like that, then we would look at maybe buying you another passport. There's about a dozen countries in the world where we can purchase you a passport. It can take anywhere from a couple of months up to 1 year. Once we have that in place, then we can look at renouncing your US citizenship. And then when we move you to another country, like Panama in this example, then we would take you through what's called a naturalization process. So you would live in the country for a certain amount of years, and then we would make an application for you to be a citizen of that country, which would get you another passport. Does that make sense?
Yes. Well, given that you mentioned, because I know we've talked, I think, in the past about countries where if you have, I think Ireland's another example, if you have some ancestry, you can
definitely.
I guess maybe you can get automatic citizenship. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so what we need to do is show the lineage and unbroken line between your ancestors and you, and that you deserve to be Irish in this example, okay? Now, it can go back in different countries have different requirements, but your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, somewhere around this. Now, it also has dependent on when you naturalized in the United States, because there were time periods, if you naturalized in the US, then it was an automatic renunciation of your citizenship back home. So depends when the grandparents or your parents may have been born as well. So there's a little bit of math, and every country is a little bit different, but we help our clients figure out all of these types of things to see if they qualify for these citizenships. So usually you're looking at a 4-figure amount in legal fees, maybe a low 5-figure amount, but usually like mid 4 figures in legal work and a couple of years, and then we would get you that citizenship. But to put things in context, let's take Italy, for example, because it's a very easy comparable, all right? If you're able to get citizenship by ancestry in Italy, the comparable would be a Malta citizenship by investment, which I have 4 clients right now that I'm taking through the process. That's $1 million donation to the government. So just like we would look at comparables in real estate, the house down the street sells for a certain amount of dollars. It's the same square footage or the same kind of lottage. It's the same type of thing with this. They're both visa-free travel to around 176 countries, 180 countries, somewhere around there. And so they're quite comparable. Now, if you can do an Italian citizenship by ancestry for, mid 4-figure legal fees, or Malta for $1 million donation, obviously, I would try to pick up that Italian one if you qualify.
Do you mind if I ask, maybe this is too personal a question, in which case you don't have to answer it, but where is your citizenship?
I have multiple citizenships. The ones that I can tell you about is, well, obviously a Canadian because I was born and raised there. I also did the St. Kitts and Nevis citizenship by investment, and the Turkish citizenship by investment, and I have some other stuff as well that I like to keep private. But I've been through these processes myself. So not only do I, read and research about it, not only do I help, hundreds of private clients go through these types of things, I also put my own money where my mouth is and reach into my wallet and pay for them as well. First and foremost, because I think that they're extremely valuable. But second of all, so that I am more valuable. I'm basically investing in myself as a consultant. So when I give you comments on these, it's not just piggybacking on someone else's work or reading what they're doing. I actually go through the process myself.
Let's skip a little bit ahead. Ordinarily, I would wait till the end to talk about it, but I want to talk about it now. I don't know how many years you've been doing it, but you've been holding something called the Expat Money Summit, which is a virtual summit people can access from anywhere. It doesn't cost them anything, and you have various people come on and talk about different aspects of all these sorts of questions. Ol Woods here is one of the presenters this year, as it turns out. So can you say a word about that? What they learn?
Sure, of course. So at the Expat Money Summit, you can go to expatmoneysummit.com. This is our 4th year I've done summits. It is an annual event. We always get a massive response. Last year, we had about 8,000 attendees. We're hoping to beat our number this year. We'll see if that happens or not. I would guess, judging on the direction of the world, that people are very, very curious about these things. As you rightly pointed out, it's completely free to attend. I make it available to everybody. Just go to expatmoneysummit.com and you'll be able to pick up a free ticket. It allows you to watch any of the presentations for 24 hours after they're presented. And yeah, I believe you're going to be coming on. You're going to be talking about generating an income from anywhere in the world. So that should be a really cool presentation. I'm looking forward to that one. But we also have Dr. Ron Paul, who's going to be a speaker, my very good friend and mentor, Doug Casey. We've got Mark Faber, who's going to be talking about investments. And then a whole bunch of the lawyers and accountants and property developers, people like this that I work with, bankers. So literally anything and everything to deal with the legal, the immigration, the tax, or the investment side of moving overseas. And then a little bit of flavor, travel, and lifestyle things that are put in there as well. But those 4+1 are the real things that we focus on.
Hey everybody, here's a bad habit you and I need to overcome right now, and that is putting things off that we should take care of right here in the present. And yes, dear listener, like getting life insurance. 40% of people with life insurance wish they'd gotten their policy at a younger age. I have tremendous peace of mind because I sat down and did it. My family's fully provided for with my life insurance policy, and it's much less expensive than you think, but move quickly because it does increase in price as you get older. Policy Genius will help you find your lowest price on life insurance with just a few clicks. With Policy Genius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. And remember, a life insurance policy through work may not offer enough protection for your family's needs, and it may not follow you if you leave your job. And if you need help anywhere along the way, Policy Genius agents can assist, and you can rely on them for unbiased advice. They have thousands of 5-star reviews on Google and Trustpilot, so don't put off life insurance. Make it easy with Policy Genius. Head to policygenius.com or click the link in the description or on the show notes page to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com. I have a number of friends who are accountants or tax accountants, and they consider it to be their job to, as to the extent they can within the law, to minimize people's tax liability. But what that means is that they have to be constantly aware of changes to tax law. They have to be up on that and everything that their clients are entitled to. And I wonder if the kind of line of work you're in means you likewise have to be up on all kinds of changes. And if so, would you say these changes are moving in the direction of making it easier for one to become an expat and relocate, or more difficult?
I definitely have to stay up to date. I have to stay up to date on probably a half a dozen different careers that people normally do. The trend is pretty bleak, actually. The government has gone around, all governments have gone around and either increased the prices on their immigration programs or made it drastically more difficult to get the immigration. So let's take, we were chatting about passports and citizenship in the Caribbean earlier. Recently, all 5 of the countries have increased their prices, in some cases doubled the amounts. So taking it from, say, a $100,000 donation to maybe a $230,000 donation, plus legal fees. Now, if people were subscribed to my newsletter or listened to my podcast, The Expat Money Show, in advance, they would have known about these things well in advance, because we took dozens of clients through the programs before these types of things happened. We can take another example. The government of Panama has already slated that they will be increasing the minimum investment from a $300,000 real estate investment to a $500,000 real estate investment. Now, we know this is happening, and we're taking tons of clients through the process to get their permanent residency here in Panama. I'm actually working with the government to try to persuade them not to make this change, because I think $300,000 is an excellent amount and very competitive for the region. I think $500,000 is now getting a little bit up there, but I think $300,000 is very, very, very much worthwhile. So yes, things are getting more expensive. They're getting more difficult, more paperwork, more KYC, AML. These types of documentations need to be done. But if these things are interesting for you, then get on our newsletter, go to expatmoney.com or sign up for the summit. It's completely free at expatmoneysummit.com and get ahead of these things, because it's not going to get any easier. That's for sure.
Yeah, I feel like if and again, this is not something I would have, you can go back and if you need evidence of this for some reason, you go back and listen to previous episodes I've had with Mikkel, where I was asking questions politely as a citizen who wants some information, but who probably isn't going to act on it. And now I'm listening much more carefully. I'm imagining myself in these various situations. So I wonder, is there a handful of destinations that you would say your clients are much more likely to have in mind when they approach you than others?
Sure. I mean, I work in probably about 22 different countries, like quite actively. But let me see if I can kind of narrow it down from there, because that's a pretty long list. Panama, absolutely. Loads of people absolutely go crazy for Panama. It's a food, water, energy independent country. It's a hub destination, so it's easy to travel in and out of. You're looking anywhere from 3 to 5 hours to get down here from the States based on where you're located. Naturally organic food. They've got the Caribbean and the Pacific side, so super gorgeous. If done correctly, 0 taxes. They've got really fantastic medical facilities here. It's judged as a safe country. So Panama through and through, loads of people coming here. Another one we do some work in is in Uruguay. Uruguay has a 10-year tax holiday. It's actually 10 years plus the year you arrive. So consider it 11 years. So you can move down there, all your income, you will have a tax holiday. So basically you're not subject to Uruguayan taxes on any of that. Obviously, we have to deal with the US side if you're American, as we discussed before. But totally safe country. Once again, food, water, and energy independent. Amazing wine there, just fantastic weather, really, really interesting. Unfortunately, it's very far. Now, this could be a good thing or a bad thing. If your fear is that your threat assessment is you want to get away from, maybe war or World War III or things like that, Uruguay is an excellent place. If you want to just pop in and out of the country, maybe it doesn't work so well because it's about 7.5 hours south of Panama. So that's usually why people will choose a place like Panama. But even I have some clients who are doing both. Uruguay requires no investment amount to get your residency. It's a low to mid 4-figure amount to do your residency there, and it's a very streamlined process. Another country we work in is Paraguay. Paraguay is extremely affordable. One of the most cheap countries that you could probably reside in. We kind of joke when we go down there that it's free. Like everything just seems to be completely free because it's so low dollar amount. Once again, food, water, and energy independent. They have the Itu Dam, which is like this massive hydroelectric dam that produces like 90% of the power in the country. It's a pretty developing country, but there's massive potential. So if you want to do developments or run a new business or take some great idea that you have, that you're seeing someone else have success with in the United States, Paraguay is a great place to have that happen. Other countries we work in are maybe Colombia, Costa Rica, a little bit in Mexico, different countries in the region. But the ones that I named, those are, very popular ones, I would say.
What about the Cayman Islands? We hear an awful lot about that. I think it might require a 7-figure real estate investment, but do you know offhand about that?
Sure. We actually just did a episode on our podcast at the Expat Money Show talking all about Cayman. That just came out a week or two ago. And we go through all of the immigration. I have a Canadian guest on there who owns a gold depository. And we talked about the immigration, the taxes, the business climate, as well as loads about precious metals. So you'll be able to find that one. But yes, you are correct. Cayman is a fantastic place, but very expensive to get into. It's a small island nation. So unfortunately, it's not food, water, and energy independent, which are mandatory criteria for the work that I do. But if you want to be around other wealthy families and influential people, a lot of people are keeping their wealth in Cayman. And yeah, it's a beautiful place to go, very strategically located to the United States, so easy to get back and forth. And I'm looking to do more work in the Cayman, but what I do, Tom, is I really try to select the best few things that each country does. And then I use that kind of as a tool in the toolbox for specific problems that my clients have, opposed to just try to find one country that's perfect and going to tick all of the boxes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure. What kind of questions do you recommend that somebody looking into expatriation ask himself before making a decision?
The main things that people, let's say, get hung up with is how much time that they're going to be able to spend back in the United States. I'll list a couple of common things and I'll give a very brief answer for each one. So how much time are you going to be able to spend back in the United States? Well, this is dependent on the backup passport that we would get you if you expatriate. And I'm using this word as in the sense of relinquishing your US citizenship, okay? If you're not relinquishing your US citizenship, you're just becoming an expat, as in you're just moving to another country, then you can go back and forth as much as you want. There's no, you'll always be an American. You can go back and forth. But if you're thinking about giving up, then you have to be a little bit cautious, especially the first couple of years. But let's say that we got you a Caribbean passport, you would apply for a tourist visa back to the US, and then you would do whatever that tourist visa allows you. Or let's say that we got you the Italian citizenship. Then there's a visa waiver program with Italy or Ireland or these types of European Union countries, and you'd be able to go back and travel for that amount. The other big one that people are asking themselves is, what about my Social Security that I paid into? What about retirement accounts? What about banking? What about the farm that I own or the condo that I just rehabbed that I really like? You still can keep all of those types of things. They're still yours. You paid for them. Nothing is going to change if you give up your US citizenship. Also, nothing will change if you decide that you want to move out of the US, keep your US citizenship, and just be a non-tax resident in the US. I mean, it can get a little bit tricky if you're from California or New York. We might need to get rid of your primary residence and move you to a zero state tax, because what I'm specifically referring to is federal tax. But in California and New York, we still have to deal with state tax as well. I'd say those are the main, two things, but kind of 2+ things that people would be asking themselves before really making a decision.
How did you become Mikkel Thorup is what I want to know, because you traveled so widely. I don't think we've actually gotten into just how widely, and you have a vast knowledge of these questions. How did it all start? Did your parents travel a lot and you just got the bug, or what happened?
I'm happy to tell you the backstory. I can probably get it done in about 5 minutes. Maybe it's kind of funny that we didn't start with that in interview 1. This is maybe our 3rd or 4th interview together. I don't think we did, but basically, Tom, when I was a child, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. And one day, my teachers pulled me out of class and they sat me down in a little room and they said, Mikkel, something doesn't work quite right in your brain. And what we want to do is send you to a special school for special boys. And that's what they did, Tom. Every day for 5 years, for 3 years, I got on a little white bus, and I took a little white bus across town, and I went to this quote unquote special school. And only problem was it was actually a regular school with a special class. So you can probably imagine what happened. I got in loads of fights and picked on and bullied, and it was pretty crummy all around. Now, this is no woe is me, poor Mikkel story. Certainly not. I got hit, and I definitely hit back. But it definitely left a bad taste in my mouth. And so I eventually got to go back to my neighborhood school, and I still got in lots of fights and didn't really enjoy my time in public education whatsoever. So I stopped going. And after a couple of years, I officially dropped out. So long story short, I stopped going to school at 12 years old, and I officially dropped out at 15. And not shortly after that, I started traveling internationally. And when I started traveling internationally, I met all these amazing human beings. And I was like, wow, I've found my people. I left Canada at 17. I am 41 now. And I basically have not stopped traveling in that entire roughly 25 years straight. So fast forward, and I've traveled to over 110 countries now. I've lived in 9, and I've circumnavigated the globe over 400 times. I read on average about 100 books a year, mostly about these types of things. I've mentored and studied under some of the best legal minds in immigration and wealth protection. They've been very generous with their time. And for the last 10 years, I have been teaching people as a professional what I do and consulting and helping them through it. But I didn't go to university for these types of things. There was no course. There's no online program that you can take. A lot of it was just trial and error and testing things out over 25 years. And and a lot of studying, let's say. And side note, my learning disability is dyslexia, which is kind of funny now that I became a professional writer and speaker for a living.
Hey, everybody, let's take a minute to thank our sponsor, Persist SEO. If you are getting buried by your competition online, then build your brand, your reputation, and your lead flow with digital marketing by Persist SEO. If you are a small local business trying to compete against large companies in the service industry, then increase your visibility with Persist SEO. Or what if you have low or no leads coming in on a consistent basis? Well, then website search engine and conversion optimization can help move the needle to a more prosperous business model for you. Are you tired of cold calling and networking, meeting places getting shut down? Use your website as a lead generation engine. Or what if you're not showing up for your services in the search engines? Well, get found with Persist SEO's expert search engine optimization. All you have to do is call 770-580-3736 or visit them at ineedseo.help for a free website audit and consultation. That's 770-580-3736 or ineedseo.help. Well, how about that, the way it all turned out? I can't help asking, though, because of your mention of education, I think one sticking point that, let's say, people looking to do this might run into if they have young children is one area where the United States is probably going to be your best bet, I would suspect, would be with regard to homeschooling, which is unheard of in huge areas of the world. So you would have to potentially send your children to the local school, I would think.
So I have 3 children myself. I homeschool our kids. There's no way I would ever let my children near a state-run school ever, especially because of my background in education, which also, side note, is probably from 12 years old. How I became a libertarian was my introduction to public education. But I always knew I wanted to homeschool my kids. My kids have been to, take my daughter, she's been to 21 countries. We're about to leave right now on a trip through the Balkans. She'll go to another 12 countries on that trip. She speaks 3 languages at native level. We've had no problem with homeschooling our kids overseas. It's legal here in Panama. If my clients have young kids that they want to homeschool, we end up picking a country for them where that is legal. There are laws that we have to follow, but it's part of the consulting work that I do. But massive fan of home education, unschooling, world schooling, homeschooling, etc. And it definitely can be done on the road. I have loads of clients who are doing it that we've assisted them with.
What would you say I asked you about questions people should ask themselves. What do you think people may not think to ask or not realize or not think about until they get there?
I think a lot of people are not mentally prepared for the cultural differences when they enter into a new country. I hear all the time of clients who, just grab all their stuff, throw it in a bag, and move down to Costa Rica, for example. And every couple of months, their neighbor is changing. They've got one person, and then 6 months later, that person moves, and another person, because they're not prepared. They didn't understand what they were getting themselves into. I spend a massive amount on the front end getting to know my private clients so that when I make a recommendation to them, they really understand what they're getting themselves into. Culturally, it can be very different, even though most Americans and Canadians have exposure to Latino culture. And I'm saying Latino because, let's say, 80% of my people end up moving north-south, opposed to, moving people to Europe or Southeast Asia or something. I have the odd one that does, but most are north-south these days. It's also been shown to have a lot more freedom in today's day and age. But there's little things like family first is kind of a double-edged sword, right? I absolutely believe in family first under all circumstances, but it can also get frustrating if someone says, okay, I'm going to be there at 1 p.m. and then, they're sitting around having dinner with or lunch with their mom or something like that, and it goes a little bit late. Well, mom comes first before work. I get it, but on the other end, it can be a little bit frustrating if you're trying to plan your day, right? So there's things like this that you have to kind of be a little bit more relaxed, let's say. Like US Canadian culture, we're very hyperactive and we're very punctual and very pointed in a lot of things. Latin culture can be a lot more relaxed. And if you don't understand the extent of that, you're going to have a tough time down here.
So I want to, of course, recommend that people attend the Expat Money Summit, not just because I'm a presenter, obviously, but I've been familiar with it for several years. I've happily endorsed it. But also at this particular moment, of all possible moments, we have to at least be open to, again, thoughts we might not have had otherwise, or at least acquaint ourselves. Even if we're not going to take action in the next 2 weeks, acquaint ourselves with what the options are, what the possibilities are, because things can change very quickly. In fact, as I've said, they've changed so quickly already, just since the first time I had Mikkel on the Tom Woods Show, that I don't want to be trying to figure all this out when there's social disorder or just when the country has reached a point that I can't tolerate anymore. And I can't believe I'm hearing myself say these words, but it could well happen. And, it's better to be safe than sorry at the very least. So the website, again, is expatmoneysummit.com. And I also want to say, Mikkel, of course, you can't do this for everybody, but you did this for me because we're friends. And I will just say, my daughter, Regina, has been interested in international options. And so I said, well, I know the greatest guy in the world on this. And I thought, well, I'd be very happy to pay his consulting fee. But because I'm an FOM, friend of Mikkel, you sat down and talked to us over Zoom, and you gave her every option in the world, and you had every possible detail. So I couldn't be happier to recommend what you're doing to everybody who listens to me, because I don't know how much you know, but it sure seems like a lot. Say that.
Well, first of all, let me just say your daughter was so lovely to spend time with, and we talked for an hour and a half or something like that. And what a bright, amazing young lady. So you've done a fantastic job as a father, 100%.
Thank you.
It was such a pleasure to get to know her. And I really hope that she pulls the trigger on these things and starts to, do some study or work about or, some backpacking, because I really think that international experience is just so valuable. And there's just really develops you as a human being. There's nothing like travel, especially trying to understand the world from someone else's perspective through their eyes. And as for your second comment, you're very kind. I have dedicated my entire life to this. I'm going on 25 years of studying these things and being interested in it. And I still get a massive kick out of helping people and being there. You know what it is, Tom? The one thing that I really, really like is I get these clients who come to me and they're so stressed and their shoulders are up and they're very anxious and things like that. And then, during our work over the first couple of weeks or months, their shoulders kind of drop and they just got a lot more confident and feel a lot better. And it's that transformation and being there at that moment in time where they kind of get it and understand and just being there at this transformative moment. I don't know how to put it into words, but it's super cool. I go crazy for it. I like being there and helping people. So I really like this work a lot.
Well, again, you can get your complimentary ticket at expatmoneysummit.com. I'll have that in the video description as well as at tomwoods.com/2533, but expatmoneysummit.com is where to go. I don't think we gave people the dates.
Yes, so it's October 7th to the 11th, 2024, October 7th to the 11th, expatmoneysummit.com. Tickets are completely free. There is a VIP upgraded ticket if you really want to, but my recommendation is just pick up the free ticket for now. Dip your toe in the water, start to learn, start to get educated, start to understand, who the lawyers are and the trustworthy people that you can work with. This is a massive resource for you guys, and it's going to be really focused on the immigration, the tax, the investment, the banking, all of these types of things, all this esoteric piece of moving to another country or investing in another country or just even having a plan B in another country. Even if you think I will never, ever, ever leave my home country, just having a second residency or a passport can be very valuable. So expatmoneysummit.com, October 7th to the 11th, go grab a free ticket.
All right, there is the information. Well, now everybody listening, you know what to do. Mikkel, thanks so much for your time.
Pleasure's all mine. Thanks so much, Tom.
And thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Make yourself and those you love less vulnerable to the regime, both mentally and physically. Get more forbidden information at tomsfreebooks.com and be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. See you next time.
Like the sound of The Tom Woods Show? My audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.